Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning. We're joined by our distinguished state delegation, which this is very special that they're here on a Monday, because right after this conference, they're going to get in their cars and head to Albany to continue to fight for the citizens of Rochester. But I want to welcome the delegation for being here, and then I'm going to turn it over to State Senator Brouk, who is going to talk about Rochester and Rochester getting its full share in the work that the delegation is going to be doing in Albany on our behalf. So with that, Senator Brouk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Evans, and thank you to the entire state delegation for being here today. We're here to discuss something in some ways very simple, to discuss historic underfunding the city of Rochester and how it's impacted poverty and violence in our communities. I'm not telling anyone anything new when I say that our city has had its challenges. Rochester is home to 3 of the 5 poorest zip codes in the entire state. The childhood poverty rate calculates that nearly half of our children live in poverty. The rate of gun violence is higher here than in both Buffalo or Syracuse, cities that sit barely an hour down the thruway. So we have to ask the question, how did we get here? It didn't happen overnight or even over the last few years. Instead, this discrepancy is in part due to the result of chronic underfunding from New York State. New York has not fulfilled its obligation to equitably fund our community, which has resulted in our city receiving significantly less state aid than our upstate counterparts. This funding is called AIM funding, aid and incentives to municipalities, and is calculated based on the need of a community, taking into account factors like population and poverty rates. Regardless of what factors you look at, it's clear Rochester is not receiving the support it deserves. Right now, Rochester receives $417 per capita in AIM funding, while Buffalo and Syracuse receive $572 and $482 respectively, a 37% and 16% increase over Rochester. When you examine these disparities in funding, it's easy to see why the challenges we see here happen. Because after years of being shortchanged by the state, Rochester has been left without the tools it needs to make investments where we need it most. This leaves our most vulnerable residents to pay the price. The safest communities are those with the most resources. They experience lower rates of poverty, homelessness, unemployment, and crime. And it's time that the state fulfills its obligation to the residents of Rochester. In this year's state budget, we're asking to finally correct this inequity and increase the investment in Rochester so that at least matches that of similar cities like Syracuse and Buffalo. And a one-time investment to correct the historic underfunding that we have seen over the last decade. For the first time, we have a united state delegation proudly representing Rochester. In fact, many of us live right here in the city. And we are committed to working collaboratively to get this done, of course, with the support of our Mayor, Malik Evans. We can't afford to wait any longer. Our city deserves this funding. The children and families of Rochester deserve this funding, and they deserve better from New York State. Now I'd like to turn it over to Malik Evans to give us another word about what this funding could mean for the city.
Thank you. Let me just say thank you to the state delegation for being here. I will tell you that this delegation has been absolutely amazing. We meet with them quarterly, if not more regularly than that. And one of the ways in which, why I'm so optimistic about this, now this is a very difficult topic. Every mayor that has come before me has probably stood at this podium and talked about the challenges and inequities that we face. But what makes this so unique and so different is that you have a United States delegation that has done so much already to deliver unprecedented investments in Rochester. So what would this mean for Rochester? think about this. As we talk about taking Rochester to the next level and making sure that we move from poverty to prosperity, it takes resources to do that. And we're not asking for any more. What we're asking, now we will always take more, but what we're asking for is parity. What we're asking for is equity. What we are asking for is what other cities are getting per capita. Because we know that what the transformational effect of those dollars would have right here in the city of Rochester. As we seek to fight violence, money for that. As we seek to create more economic opportunities. You know, our Office of Financial Empowerment is all about empowering residents to make sure that we get dollars in their pockets so that they can provide for their families. It takes dollars to do that. So could you imagine what a $30 million investment could do for our city? It would be transformational. It would allow us to take Rochester to the next level. So I am thankful for Senator Samra Brouk and all of our members of the state and assembly delegation for their work that they are going to do on behalf of this. This is a fight that is worth going after. You know, some people will say, oh, it's impossible, the formula is difficult. It is, but it's important that we continue to raise this issue. And then the last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to the senator is that we know that of the top 25 poorest zip codes in New York State, top 25 poorest zip codes in New York State, 5 are in Rochester. 5 out of top 25. And then you hear me say this all the time, and then of the top 5 in New York State, top 5 in New York State, 3 are contained within the city of Rochester. This has long-term effects. This investment is an investment that will help all of us in the long run. Because think about all of the cost of poverty. It is expensive to be poor. It costs more money in the long run. So these investments, these front-end investments, by simply making sure that we get parity with state aid, will go a long way with helping to transform our city. So I thank our delegation, Assemblymember Clark, Senator Cooney, Assemblymember Lunsford, Senator Brouk, Assemblymember Meeks, the Dean of the delegation, Assemblymember Harry Bronson. These folks have had our back for so long, and I'm just happy that they are taking time. They got to run to Albany. They could have said, Mayor, we don't have time for this. But on a Monday morning at 9 a.m., they are standing here in City Hall to say that this is something that is worth fighting for. They fought for it last year, and they're going to keep fighting for it this year. So I'm so thankful for the men and women of our delegation and for all the work that they are going to put behind this and all of the other priorities that Rochester has during this upcoming budget season. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Evans. Next, I'd like to call up my colleague in the Senate, Senator Cooney.
Thank you, Senator Brouk. As the mayor was speaking, all of these portraits of former mayors were giving you the thumbs up because this is not a new issue. And as the mayor correctly said, for far too long, Rochester has been trying to make the case to leaders in Albany that we need help. And, I have an interesting perspective because I've been on both sides of the advocacy, both as a city hall official, but also as a state senator. And now I see, thanks to the leadership of my colleague, Senator Brouk, that we are positioning this around some of our greatest challenges. And hopefully that will begin to move the needle a little bit when it comes to how to have this conversation. I'll also share that as the former chair of the Upstate Cities Committee, I had a chance to travel across the state, really to 11 cities, also experiencing issues with the AIM aid formula. Clearly there's some structural work that needs to happen. And as the mayor correctly said, this is about quality of life. When we talk about the number of plows that are on the street, when we talk about the resources that our law enforcement officers have, when we talk about the opportunities for our youth in the summer to get good paying jobs, when we talk about the number of hours that our libraries can stay open in the neighborhoods, that's what this funding is about. It's about making and improving the quality of life here in the city of Rochester. And we stand united in this work to make sure that Rochester gets its fair share and that cities all across the state of New York get this opportunity to provide for its citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Cooney. Next, I'd like to call up Assemblymember Sarah Clark.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Senator Brouk, for putting in a very concise and clear way what the lack of parity on AIM funding has done and what it has looked like historically over the years. In other instances, we've really been able to relate it to the extreme poverty we have in Rochester. I mean, I think all our upstate cities struggle in some way with poverty, but our extreme poverty is the highest in the state and one of the top highest in the nation. And part of that has to do with when this formula was locked in, how it was locked in, what Rochester looked like then compared to what Rochester looks like today. And what we see is that extreme poverty has only deepened, and now we see the direct correlation to some of the challenges we have with some of the violence that we're seeing in our city. These are things that can be fixed. I live in a zip code that is in the top 25. It's just outside of the top 5. But when you look at these stark numbers, when you understand what that means, when these are high poverty zip codes, it means that we need extra resources. We need to really put investment in our rec centers, in our youth jobs. We need to put investment in our business corridors that are in our neighborhoods, not just in downtown. These take dollars. And again, we're not asking for more than our fair share. We're asking for our fair share. It will be the difference between whether a youth has a job when they want it, whether a family has mental health services when they need it, whether there's a place to go play basketball and a league to join in the summer. That's the difference these dollars make, and we know it'll actually move the numbers on extreme poverty and also make a difference with the youth, with the violence that we're seeing. The time to act is now. I can't thank the senator enough for making sure we see it clearly and concisely what this has done for Rochester and why the time is, we can't wait any longer. The time is now to get this done. I'm excited to join with my colleagues in the fight this year to make our case, to make sure people understand that the challenges Rochester's seeing, unprecedented compared to our other upstate cities, it's time to fix this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Clark. And now to round us out, I invite up my colleague, Assemblymember Damon Meeks.
Thank you. I'm absolutely elated to be here this morning with the mayor of the city of Rochester and the upstate delegation, the Rochester delegation. As spoken to before me, there's a number of challenges that we're faced with. And one of the things that's really dear to heart to me is our children. And Frederick Douglass stated, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And one of the significant things about that is he never said, don't take on the task of repairing broken men. He just said it's easier to build strong children. So with these resources, we look to provide additional resources for our children. When we take a look back, 80s, 90s, when we were presented with certain challenges in our community, there were a number of programs that were presented to our youth, such as the Midnight Basketball Leagues. Those programs kept our children off the streets. They were with real strong mentors and people that pushed them to do better and to be better. So we look forward to fighting for this funding and additional funding for an array of programs throughout the city of Rochester in order to push for the betterment of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember, and thank you to all my colleagues and, of course, Mayor Evans for being with us today, and thank you all for joining.